The initial denial was an impersonal email, a block of text generated by an algorithm and approved by a person who had likely spent less than 4 seconds considering the matter. The claim number, a long and meaningless string of digits, was cited. The policy number was referenced. The specific clause, buried on page 87 of a document Elias Vance had never read, was invoked, subsection 11b, covering non-standard, experimental, or uncertified modifications. The amount was trivial, barely $400. It was for a cracked manifold on the engine of a client's aging Ford pickup truck, a simple repair made complicated by a hairline fracture discovered during a routine tune-up. 7 times he submitted the claim, and 7 times it was rejected by a cascade of different insurance carriers, all subsidiaries of the same monolithic parent company, Omnicorp. Each time, the reason was the same. The truck's engine, while old, had a particular custom-forged intake that the original owner had installed decades ago. It was this piece of ancient, bespoke steel that the algorithms flagged as experimental. To Elias, it was just a part of the whole, a problem to be solved. To the insurance company, it was a liability, a deviation from the norm that justified denial. Catherine Thorne did not deal in amounts as small as $400. Her world was one of billions, of leveraged buyouts and hostile takeovers. She sat in a corner office 40 floors above the city, the world outside a silent, sprawling map of her influence. The glass walls of her office did not insulate her from the world so much as frame it as a thing she owned. Her suit was a severe, tailored sheath of dark gray wool that cost more than the truck Elias was working on. On her desk, a single tablet displayed the final asset list of Atherton Dynamics, a once proud engineering firm her company, a division of Omnicorp, had acquired 6 months prior for its patent portfolio. The rest of the company was being liquidated. She swiped a finger across the screen, her expression one of mild annoyance. Most of it was straightforward: office furniture, CNC machines, server racks. Then she paused on a line item designated Yard 4, Scrap and Prototyping Materials. The attached note from her acquisitions team was brief. Estimated value, negative. Contains several tons of scrap metal, derelict vehicle chassis, and miscellaneous equipment. Recommend paying a disposal firm to clear the lot to mitigate environmental liability. David, she said, her voice calm and sharp, cutting through the hushed air of the office. Her assistant, David Chen, materialized at her door, his posture a study in anxious deference. He was young, intelligent, and perpetually terrified of her. Yes, Mr. Thorne. This Atherton scrap yard. What is the cost to have it cleared? David consulted his own tablet, his fingers flying. The lowest bid for full environmental remediation and disposal is $22,000. Catherine's lip curled in distaste. It was not the amount that bothered her, it was the inelegance of it. Paying to get rid of something was a loss, a small but irritating admission of failure. $22,000 to haul away junk, she mused. That feels inefficient. She looked at David, but her gaze went right through him. She was not asking for his opinion, she was thinking aloud, using him as a sounding board. Listed for sale. As is, where is? Buyer assumes all liability. Put it on the public asset disposal portal. Price it at $1,000. David blinked. $1,000. For the whole lot. But the liability. The contract will be ironclad. For $1,000, some local scrap hauler will think it is Christmas. They will sign anything. We will be free of the liability, and we will be up $1,000 instead of down $22,000. It is a rounding error, but it is an elegant rounding error. See to it. She dismissed him with a wave of her hand and returned to her screen, the matter already forgotten. She had a meeting in an hour to discuss the acquisition of a company in Brazil. The scrapyard was a speck of dust she had just flicked off her immaculate desk. Back in his garage, Elias Vance finished his work on the Ford. He had decided to simply absorb the cost of the manifold himself. It was not worth the fight. His garage was not like other repair shops. There were no greasy calendars on the wall, no chaotic piles of parts. It was as clean and orderly as a surgical theater. Every tool hung in its designated place on a pegboard outline. The concrete floor was sealed and polished, swept clean every evening. On a small, sturdy desk in the corner, his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was carefully drawing a diagram of a gearbox, her brow furrowed in concentration. She had his eyes and his quiet, methodical nature. "Is it done, Papa?" she asked, not looking up from her drawing. "Almost," Elias said. He wiped his hands on a clean rag, his movements deliberate. "Just need to run the final diagnostic." He lived a life of routine and precision. It was a small life, a quiet one, but it was his. He had built it himself, board by board, after his old life had burned down. The smell of grease and metal was his refuge, the hum of a well-tuned engine his peace. The impersonal cruelty of the insurance company was a dissonant note, a reminder of a world he had deliberately left behind. A world that saw value only in numbers on a page and compliance with rigid, unthinking rules. A world that had no room for a custom-forged intake manifold, or for the men who understood how to make it sing. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Elias sat at his computer. The fight over the $400 had left a bitter taste. It was the principle of it. The casual dismissal. On a whim, he typed Omnicorp Asset Disposal into the search bar. He was not sure what he was looking for. A contact, perhaps. A way to appeal to a human being. The first result was a public portal, a sterile website listing everything from used office chairs to industrial lathes. He scrolled through it, an odd sense of melancholy washing over him. He saw listings for equipment he recognized, machines he had once used. He was scrolling through the ghost of his former employer. And then he saw it. Lot number 734. Atherton Dynamics Storage Yard 4. Location, Greendale. Contents, scrap metal, vehicle chassis, miscellaneous equipment. Price, $1,000. Conditions, as is, where is. Buyer assumes all legal and environmental liability. Elias stared at the screen. His breath caught in his chest. Yard 4. He knew Yard 4. He had not thought about it in years, but now the memory came flooding back, clear and sharp. It was not a scrap yard. It was a graveyard, but a graveyard for titans. It was where the prototypes went. The failed experiments, the ones that were too expensive, too radical, or too far ahead of their time. The projects that were shelved but never truly discarded, kept under lock and key in tarpaulin, waiting for a future that never came. He knew exactly what was under those tarps. He knew the shape of the chassis, the composition of the metal. He knew because he had put most of it there himself. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. His heart was pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat in the silence of the house. For 5 years, he had been content. He had built a wall around his life, a fortress of solitude and routine to protect himself and his daughter. He had turned his back on ambition, on the relentless pursuit of the next great thing. But this was different. This was not about ambition. This was about legacy. It was about rescuing something precious from the hands of people who saw it as junk. It was about justice, in a quiet, mechanical sort of way. He picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, warm and familiar. "Marcus. It's Elias. I need your help. I'm about to do something either very smart or very stupid." Marcus Cole had been Elias's friend since college. A sharp, practical lawyer, he was one of the few people who knew the full story of Elias's past. He knew that the quiet mechanic who fixed transmissions for a living held advanced degrees in mechanical engineering and materials science. He knew that Elias Vance had once been the lead designer for the most advanced projects at Atherton Dynamics, a prodigy whose name was spoken with a kind of reverence in the closed circles of high-performance engine design. "Lay it on me," Marcus said, his voice instantly alert. He knew Elias was not prone to exaggeration. "Atherton's old prototype yard is for sale," Elias said, his voice low and even. "Omnicorp is selling it for $1,000. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Marcus was processing the implications. He remembered the stories Elias had told him, late at night, after his wife's death. Stories of engines that could rewrite the laws of thermodynamics, of materials that existed only in theory until Elias and his team had brought them to life. "Elias," Marcus said carefully. "Are you sure you want to go back to that world?" "I am not going back to their world," Elias replied, his gaze still fixed on the darkness outside. "I am bringing a piece of my world into this one." The reason for Elias's obscurity was a simple, brutal tragedy. His wife, Elena, had also been an engineer at Atherton, a brilliant aerodynamicist. They had been a perfect team, their skills complementing each other, their passion for the work matched only by their love for each other. They were working on their magnum opus, a revolutionary internal combustion engine codenamed Ethelred. It was a project of immense complexity and beauty. Then, one rainy Tuesday, Elena's car had been struck by a drunk driver on her way home from work. She was gone. The light went out of Elias's world. The work, once a source of joy, became a source of unbearable pain. Every schematic, every calibration, was a reminder of her. When Omnicorp began its acquisition, offering generous severance packages to senior staff they deemed redundant, Elias took the offer without hesitation. He took the money, took his patents, which he had shrewdly retained personal ownership of in his initial contract, and he walked away. He bought the small house with the large garage in a quiet town and devoted himself to raising the daughter Elena had left him. He had traded a life of professional acclaim for a life of paternal devotion. He did not regret it. But the fire had never truly gone out, it had merely been banked, smoldering beneath a thick layer of quiet grief and duty. The listing for Yard 4 was a gust of wind on those dying embers. Marcus Cole understood. He had seen his friend through the worst of it. He had handled the legal work for Elena's estate and helped Elias set up his small business. He trusted Elias's judgment implicitly, especially when it came to mechanics and engineering. If Elias said there was value in that yard, Marcus believed him. "All right," Marcus said, his voice shifting into professional mode. "Here is what we will do. I will form a shell corporation. A simple LLC. It will be the official buyer. It will insulate you personally from any potential liability. The $1,000 is easy, but you will need more for an initial survey, security, basic equipment. I can front you $50,000 as a personal loan, convertible to a stake in the company if this pans out." "Thank you, Marcus," Elias said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of friendship. "Do not thank me yet," Marcus warned. "These Omnicorp people, they are sharks. Their contracts are designed to crush people like you. I will need to see the purchase agreement before you sign anything. But if they are as eager to get rid of this as you think they are, they will be sloppy. Arrogance creates blind spots. Let us hope they are very arrogant." The visit to Yard 4 was arranged for the following Friday. David Chen was assigned to meet the prospective buyer. He drove a company-issued electric sedan that purred silently into the gravel lot outside the rusted chain-link fence. He stepped out, smoothing his suit, his expensive leather shoes crunching on the loose stones. He looked at the overgrown yard with disdain. Weeds grew thick through cracks in the asphalt. Tarps, gray with age and dirt, covered lumpy, indistinct shapes. The air smelled of rust and damp earth. Elias was already there, standing by an old, reliable-looking pickup truck. He wore work boots, faded jeans, and a clean but well-worn flannel shirt. He did not look like a corporate entity. He looked like what David expected, a scrap hauler. "Mr. Vance?" David asked, his tone clipped and impatient. He did not offer to shake hands. Elias nodded. "It is just Elias." "The LLC is Precision Mechanical Solutions?" David asked, consulting his tablet. "That is right," Elias said. The name was Marcus's idea. Vague but professional. "Fine," David said. He unlocked the gate with a key from a small lockbox. The gate shrieked in protest as he pushed it open. "Here it is. Everything you see. $1,000. The contract is digital. You sign, you wire the money, I give you the keys. Simple." He gestured vaguely at the yard. "Take a look around if you must, but what you see is what you get. We make no warranties." Elias walked into the yard. He did not need to pull back the tarps. He ran a hand along a curved fender visible beneath a tear in one of the covers. He recognized the line. It was from the chassis of Project Chimera, a mid-engine sports car concept that was abandoned because the cost of its carbon composite monocoque was deemed too high. He walked further, his boots crunching on broken pavement. He stopped by a long, low shape. He knelt, his fingers tracing the outline of a massive intercooler housing, barely visible. He knew this one, too. It was part of the test bed for a diesel-electric hybrid powertrain designed for heavy transport. It had failed its emissions tests, but the core generator technology was revolutionary. He moved with a quiet purpose that David found unnerving. The man was not kicking things or poking at them like a typical scrap dealer. He was observing, his eyes taking in details David could not see. He seemed to be listening to the silence of the place. Finally, Elias walked to the very back of the yard, to a series of reinforced, seaworthy shipping containers. They looked anonymous, just big metal boxes. But Elias stopped at one in particular, painted a faded blue. He ran his hand over the complex locking mechanism on the door. "This is all included?" Elias asked, his voice steady. "Everything inside the fence," David confirmed, a note of condescending amusement in his voice. "You could find treasure in there, for all I know," he chuckled softly. The idea was absurd. Elias stood up and looked back at him. His expression was unreadable. "We will take it." Back at the gate, Marcus Cole, who had arrived quietly a few minutes earlier, reviewed the contract on his own tablet. He read every line, his expression neutral. David shifted his weight, impatient. "It is a standard asset disposal agreement," David said. "Quite simple." Marcus looked up, his eyes sharp. "It is a standard agreement, which means it is designed to protect you, not us. But," he continued, a faint smile touching his lips, "it is also lazy. You have warranted that Omnicorp is the rightful owner of all assets on the property, but you have failed to provide a detailed inventory. You have transferred all liability, yes, but you have also transferred all ownership, specified and unspecified. It is clean. We will sign." Elias signed the tablet with a stylus. Marcus initiated the wire transfer from his phone. A moment later, David's tablet pinged. He looked at it, then at the two men. He felt a strange, inexplicable sense of being outmaneuvered, but he could not articulate why. He had done his job. He had offloaded a liability for a net gain. Mr. Isthorn would be pleased. "It is all yours," David said, handing a set of old, rusted keys to Elias. "Good luck with the junk." He turned and walked back to his silent electric car, eager to leave the place behind. Elias and Marcus watched him go. When the car was out of sight, Marcus turned to Elias. "So, did you find your treasure?" Elias looked at the faded blue shipping container at the back of the yard. "We need to buy a very good lock," he said. The first day was about securing the perimeter. Elias and Marcus replaced the flimsy chain on the gate with a heavy-duty hardened steel lock and chain. Elias then walked the entire fence line, identifying and patching weak spots. It was his now, and the first rule of ownership was security. He spent the rest of the day simply walking the yard, this time with the tarps pulled back. It was a mechanical ghost town. He saw the skeletal remains of projects that had consumed years of his life. He felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of purpose. These were not failures. They were lessons. They were stepping stones. Finally, he returned to the blue container. The lock was a specialized, high-security model from a German manufacturer. He recognized it. There was no key. It was designed to be opened with a specific sequence of actions using a proprietary tool. He did not have the tool, but he had designed the mounting bracket for the lock. He knew its weaknesses. He went back to his truck and returned with a small, powerful drill and a specific hardened drill bit. He did not attack the lock itself. He drilled 4 small, precise holes in the container door around the lock's housing. Then he used a crowbar, not for leverage, but to insert the tip into the holes and apply a specific, shearing pressure. With a groan of protesting metal, the entire mounting plate came free. The lock was defeated, the mechanism itself untouched. He pulled the heavy doors open. The air that wafted out was cool and dry, smelling faintly of oil and preserved metal. The container was not full of junk. It was a workshop in suspended animation. On one side, custom-built shelving held sealed, nitrogen-purged cases of components. On the other, covered by a thick, silver-lined dust cover, was a large, oblong shape. Elias walked to it, his boots echoing in the sudden enclosure. He reached out and pulled the cover back. There it was. The Ethelred. It sat on a custom engine stand, a sculpture of aluminum, titanium, and exotic alloys. It was not an engine in the conventional sense. It was a compact, modular power unit. A small, hyper-efficient two-stroke diesel generator at its core, designed to run at a single, perfect RPM, powered a bank of ultracapacitors. Those capacitors, in turn, fed 4 high-torque electric motors, one for each wheel of the conceptual vehicle it was designed for. It was a series hybrid, but a version of it so advanced, so power-dense, that nothing in the commercial market came close, even now, 5 years later. The genius was in the details: the ceramic-coated piston crowns, the valveless intake system that used resonant frequencies to manage airflow, the self-learning software that could adjust the engine's operating parameters in microseconds. He saw Elena's contribution everywhere: the smooth, aerodynamic casing designed to manage heat with minimal drag, the lightweight mounting brackets that were both elegant and immensely strong. They had built it together. It was their symphony in metal and code. He ran a hand over the cool, dust-free surface of the valve cover. Stamped into the metal was a small, discrete plate. Ethelred Prototype 004, Final Iteration. E. Vance, E. Rojas. Rojas had been Elena's maiden name. Seeing it there, next to his own, was a physical blow. He steadied himself against the engine stand, his emotions a turbulent mix of profound grief and fierce, protective joy. They had tried to bury it. They had called it scrap. But it was here. It had waited for him. The next day, Elias made 2 phone calls. The first was to Ben Carter, a master machinist in his late 50s. Ben had been the head of Atherton's fabrication shop, a man who could turn a block of raw metal into a component with micron-level precision. He had been laid off in the first wave and was now working part-time at a community college, teaching bored teenagers basic lathe operation. Ben, it is Elias Vance. Elias, Ben's voice was rough, but warm. I have not heard that name in a long time. How are you, son? I am well. I have a question for you. Do you remember Ethelred? There was a pause. Do I remember? I still have dreams about machining that damn turbine housing. Craziest thing I ever built. Why? I have it, Ben. The final prototype. And the test rig. And the schematics. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Where? Ben finally asked, his voice a whisper. A long story. The short version is, it is mine now. But I cannot get it running alone. I need your hands. When do I start? Ben asked, without a moment's hesitation. There was no discussion of pay, of hours, of logistics. It was enough that the project was alive. The second call was to a woman named Anya Sharma. Anya was a software engineer, a quiet genius who had written the control software for the Ethelred. She had been poached by a Silicon Valley tech firm after the layoff, but she hated the corporate culture, the endless meetings about user engagement and monetization. Elias's pitch to her was even simpler. Anya. I have the hardware. It needs its soul back. She resigned from her 6-figure job the next day. The work began. It was slow, methodical, and deeply satisfying. The first week was spent transforming the yard. They cleared weeds, patched the asphalt, and organized the scattered chassis and parts into a logical order. The other shipping containers were opened, revealing a treasure trove of diagnostic equipment, specialized tools, and raw materials, blocks of titanium, spools of carbon fiber, ingots of rare earth alloys. Omnicorp had literally given them the factory along with the product. They moved the Ethelred from its container into the largest of the empty garage bays on the property, which they converted into a clean room environment. The process montage began in earnest. Ben Carter, his hands steady as a surgeon's, began the meticulous process of disassembling the engine. Every bolt was torqued to a precise specification, and he measured the force required to loosen each one, making notes in a logbook. This was not just disassembly, it was a forensic analysis. Elias, meanwhile, focused on the systems. He re-established power to the main workshop and began the painstaking process of recommissioning the engine dynamometer, a complex piece of machinery capable of simulating any load condition. He replaced dried-out seals, flushed old hydraulic fluids, and recalibrated hundreds of sensors. Lily would often sit in the workshop after school, watching her father work. She did not understand the complexity, but she understood the focus. She saw the care he took with each wire, each connection. She would ask simple questions that cut to the heart of the matter. Why is that wire red, Papa? Because it carries the most power, sweetie. It is a warning. It tells you to be careful. To respect it. Anya arrived a month later, and she set up a command center in a small, clean office they had built. She began the process of resurrecting the Ethelred's brain. The original code was stored on a series of hardened drives they found in one of the cases. She painstakingly verified every line, looking for data corruption or degradation. She talked to the code as if it were a living thing, coaxing it back to life. There were minor setbacks. A custom fuel injector had seized from years of disuse. Ben, instead of trying to force it, spent 3 days slowly heating and cooling it in a specialized oil bath until it came free without any damage. A critical power regulator for the dynamometer had failed. Elias, using the original Atherton schematics he had found, rebuilt it from scratch using components scavenged from another piece of abandoned equipment in the yard. They were not just restoring an engine, they were rebuilding a world, a self-contained ecosystem of skill and ingenuity. They worked not by the clock, but by the task. Some days were 16 hours long. Others were short, ending when a particular process, like the curing of an epoxy, required them to simply wait. After 3 months of relentless, focused effort, the day came. The Ethelred was fully reassembled, mounted on the dynamometer. Fuel lines were connected. Data cables snaked from its sensor arrays to Anya's bank of monitors. The three of them stood in the control booth, a small, glass-enclosed room overlooking the engine. Lily stood between Elias and the window, her hands pressed against the cool glass. "Ready for primary ignition sequence," Anya said, her voice calm, but her fingers poised tensely over the keyboard. Ben nodded, his eyes fixed on the engine. "Pressure is stable. All green." Elias took a deep breath. He looked at the engine, his engine, Elena's engine. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Engage." Anya typed a command. A low hum filled the room as the ultracapacitors began to charge. A moment later, a high-pitched whine started as the starter motor spun up the small diesel generator. There was a soft metallic cough, then another. And then, with a smooth, deep thrum that was felt more than heard, the Ethelred came to life. It settled into a perfect, vibration-free idle. On Anya's screens, numbers bloomed. Engine temperature, fuel consumption, power output. All were exactly where they should be. "Idle is stable at 2000 RPM, Anya reported, a smile finally breaking through her professional calm. "Efficiency is nominal, no, wait. It is 4% higher than the last test run 5 years ago. My software updates must be working." Ben let out a long, slow breath. "Sounds sweet," was all he said. Elias watched, his heart full. He felt a hand slip into his. He looked down at Lily. She was staring at the engine, her expression one of awe. "It is working, Papa," she whispered. "Yes, it is," he said. "Now, let us see what it can do." For the next week, they put the engine through its paces. They ran simulations of hill climbs, of high-speed sprints, of stop-and-go traffic. The results were astounding. The Ethelred was not just good, it was revolutionary. Its power density was double that of the best production hybrid systems on the market. Its efficiency was in a class of its own. The final test was a full-power run, simulating a demand for maximum acceleration from a standstill. "Bring it to full load," Elias ordered. Anya's fingers danced across the keyboard. In the test bay, the hum of the engine deepened into a powerful, resonant roar. The dynamometer's massive brakes strained to absorb the energy. The lights in the workshop flickered as the system drew a massive amount of power. On the main screen, the power output number climbed, passing 500 horsepower, then 600, then 800. It finally peaked and held steady at a staggering 1,250 horsepower, with over 2,000 foot-pounds of instantaneous torque from the electric motors. And it did this while consuming fuel at a rate equivalent to a small family sedan. They had done it. They had not just restored a prototype. They had validated a revolution. Elias did not try to sell his technology to the major automakers. They were too big, too slow, too political. Their R&D departments would see the Ethelred not as a breakthrough, but as a threat to their existing investments. Instead, he had Marcus Cole make a single, discreet inquiry. The target was a small, fiercely independent Swiss hypercar manufacturer named Vale Ryan. Vale Ryan made fewer than 20 cars a year, each a masterpiece of engineering sold for millions of dollars to a select clientele. Their entire brand was built on pushing the boundaries of performance and technology. 2 weeks later, a helicopter landed in a field adjacent to the yard. A single man emerged, Klaus Richter, Valerian's legendary chief engineer. He was a tall, austere man with a reputation for suffering no fools. He arrived not with a team of lawyers, but alone. Elias met him at the gate. They exchanged a brief, firm handshake. There was no small talk. Elias led him to the workshop. Richter spent the first hour simply walking around the Ethelred, silent, his eyes taking in every detail. He ran his fingers over the welds on the custom exhaust manifold. He examined the complex wiring harness. He was not looking at it like a buyer, he was looking at it like a fellow artist, appreciating the brushstrokes. Then, he turned to Elias. "Run it," he said. For the next 5 hours, Elias, Ben, and Anya put the engine through a battery of tests that Richter requested. He asked for specific load points, for thermal efficiency readings under stress, for data on the capacitor charge and discharge rates. He spoke to Anya in the dense, abbreviated language of code, and to Ben in the precise terminology of metallurgy and fabrication. He and Elias barely spoke at all, but there was a deep, unspoken understanding between them. Richter recognized the mind that had designed the engine. He saw the elegance, the refusal to compromise, the obsessive attention to detail. At the end of the day, Richter stood before the now silent engine. "I have been designing engines for 30 years, he said, his German accent precise. "I have seen many claims, many so-called revolutions. Most are marketing. This," he gestured to the Ethelred, "is not marketing. This is real." He turned to Elias. "We do not want to buy your prototype. We want a partnership. We want 20 of these units for our next model, the Vale Ryan Chimera. And we want to license the core technology for our future development. My company has authorized me to make you an offer." The deal was finalized a week later. It was not for a sale, but a licensing and manufacturing agreement. Elias's new company, which he officially named Lilly Dynamics, would produce 20 complete Ethelred power units for Vale Ryan. The upfront payment for the license alone was $15 million. The contract for the 20 units was worth another $40 million. Marcus Cole's $50,000 loan had yielded an almost unbelievable return. Elias was, overnight, wealthier than he had ever imagined. But as he stood in the workshop, looking at the check in his hand, his expression was unchanged. The money was just a tool. It was the means to continue the work. The first inkling of trouble at Omnicorp came not from a boardroom, but from a magazine. A junior analyst in Catherine Thorne's division was flipping through a highly respected but niche European automotive engineering journal. He was an enthusiast, and he read it for pleasure. A headline caught his eye: "The Phoenix of Atherton, lost, Ethelred, prototype resurfaces, promises to redefine the hypercar." The article was detailed, full of technical specifications and breathless praise. It described the revolutionary series hybrid powertrain, its incredible power density, and its history as a lost project from the defunct Atherton Dynamics. And it named the small, unknown American company that had brought it back to life, Lilly Dynamics, founded by a man named Elias Vance. The article concluded with the news of the landmark licensing deal with Vale Ryan. The analyst felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. He remembered the name Atherton. He remembered the liquidation. He went into the digital archives. It took him less than an hour to connect the dots. The asset disposal of Yard 4. The buyer, a Shell LLC. The price, $1,000. The supervising employee on the sale, David Chen. He knew he could not sit on this. With a feeling of profound terror, he requested a meeting with Catherine Thorne. Catherine listened to the analyst's report without expression. Her face was a marble mask, but her eyes, cold and furious, were fixed on the tablet displaying the article. She scrolled through it, her finger moving with sharp, angry taps. She saw the pictures of the engine, the performance graphs, the mention of the multi-million-dollar deal. She saw the name Elias Vance, and it meant nothing to her. He was a nobody. A scrap hauler. When the analyst was finished, she was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's climate control. "Find David Chen," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Tell him to be in my office in 5 minutes." David arrived, looking pale and confused. He had been working on a new project, a portfolio of distressed real estate in the Midwest. The Atherton deal was a distant memory. Catherine did not ask him to sit. She simply turned her tablet around so he could see the screen. "Explain this," she said. David read the headline. His blood ran cold. He scrolled down, his hand trembling slightly. He saw the pictures of the engine. He did not recognize it, but he recognized the name Atherton. He saw the name Elias Vance, and a vague memory surfaced of a quiet man in a flannel shirt. He saw the mention of the Valerian deal, the millions of dollars. And he saw his own name in the internal report the analyst had pulled up, the one that showed him signing off on the $1,000 sale. I do not understand," he stammered. "It was a scrapyard. It was appraised as a liability. I followed protocol." "You followed protocol," Catherine repeated, the words dripping with contempt. "You looked, but you did not see. You saw junk, because you were told it was junk. You had no curiosity, no initiative, no insight. You saw a man in work boots and you assumed he was a fool. It turns out the fool was the one in the expensive suit." She looked at him, her gaze utterly merciless. "The value of the assets in that yard, the intellectual property you sold for $1,000, is likely north of $100 million. Potentially more. This is the single largest financial oversight in the history of this division. Your career here is over. Clear out your desk. I want you out of this building in 1 hour." David stood there, swaying slightly, his face ashen. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He turned and stumbled out of the office, a man whose future had just been erased. Catherine watched him go, but her anger was not for him. He was just an instrument of the failure. The failure was hers. She had signed off on the strategy. Her philosophy, her entire method of evaluating the world, had been proven catastrophically wrong. 2 days later, Catherine Thorne drove her own car, a sleek, black German sedan, out of the city. She did not delegate this. She had to see it for herself. She followed the directions to the address listed for Lilly Dynamics. She arrived at the gate she had last seen in a grainy satellite photo on an analyst's report. It was no longer rusted. It was clean, functional, and bore a new, simple sign made of brushed steel, Lilly Dynamics. The yard beyond was transformed. It was clean, orderly. The derelict chassis were gone, either scrapped or neatly stacked, waiting for some future purpose. The cracked asphalt was patched. The main building gleamed with new paint and windows. It was still a humble, industrial place, but it was now a place of purpose, not decay. Elias met her at the door to the main workshop. He wore the same kind of clothes as before, simple, practical. He was wiping grease from his hands with a clean rag. He looked at her expensive car and her severe suit, and his expression was neutral. He was not surprised to see her. He had been expecting her. "Mr. Thorne," he said. It was not a question. "Mr. Vance," she replied, her voice tight. "You have been busy." She stepped into the workshop. It was warm, bright, and smelled of clean oil and hot metal. The Ethelred sat on its stand in the center of the room, a piece of industrial art. Ben Carter and Anya Sharma stopped what they were doing and watched her, their expressions wary. Catherine walked around the engine, just as Klaus Richter had done. But she was not seeing the engineering. She was seeing the money. She was calculating the scale of her loss. "It is an impressive piece of work," she finally conceded, her voice strained. "Atherton's R&D budget put to good use, I see." She was trying to reframe it, to claim some remote ownership of his success. Elias did not rise to the bait. He just watched her, waiting. "My company, Omnicorp, is always looking for innovative partners," she began, shifting into her familiar negotiation mode. She was trying to re-establish the power dynamic, to become the buyer again. "Your company has a promising technology. I am here to propose an acquisition. We are prepared to make you a very generous offer to bring Lilly Dynamics under the Omnicorp umbrella." You would have access to our resources, our manufacturing capabilities, our global distribution network. Elias let the silence stretch out after she finished. He walked over to a workbench and picked up a small, cracked piece of metal. It was the manifold from the old Ford truck. He held it in his palm. "No," he said. The word was quiet but absolute. It hung in the air, immovable. Catherine's composure finally cracked. "No. Do you have any idea what I am offering you?" "I am offering you the world." "You are offering me a cage," Elias said, his voice still level. "I have everything I need right here. I have my work. I have my team. I have my daughter." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than neutrality in his eyes. It was not anger. It was a kind of pity. "You know what started all this?" he asked, holding up the cracked manifold. "This. A $400 part. I filed an insurance claim with one of your subsidiary companies. They denied it 7 times, citing a clause about experimental parts. It was that denial, that refusal to see the reality of a situation for the sake of a rule, that led me to your website. It led me here." He placed the manifold gently back on the workbench. "You did not lose $100 million when you sold me this yard. You lost it when your company refused to pay a $400 claim. Your system is built to see risk, not value. It is built to say no. And that is why you will never understand what we do here." Catherine Thorne stood there, speechless. The sheer, galling smallness of the initial error, the $400 seed from which this catastrophic failure had grown, was a blow more profound than any financial loss. It was an indictment of her entire worldview. She had built an empire on the principle of ruthless, large-scale efficiency, and it had been undone by a detail too small for her to even notice. She turned, without another word, and walked out of the workshop. She got into her car and drove away, the dust from the gravel road coating its perfect black finish. Elias Vance watched her go. He did not feel a sense of triumph. He felt a quiet sense of finality. The past was settled. He turned back to his team. "Anya," he said, his voice returning to its normal, practical tone. "Let us run the thermal cycling test on the new capacitor bank." The work continued. Lilly Dynamics did not become a corporate giant. It remained small, focused, and profitable beyond all expectation. They accepted a handful of other contracts, developing specialized powertrain components for aerospace and marine applications. Elias used the profits to buy the land, to build a state-of-the-art but modest research facility, and to create a generous trust for his daughter's future. He also established a foundation that provided scholarships for engineering students, and a pro bono legal fund, managed by Marcus Cole, to help small businesses and individuals fight unjust insurance claim denials. The old Ford truck that had started it all was eventually fully restored, its engine purring perfectly with a new, custom-fabricated manifold that Elias had machined himself. It was not a show car. He used it to run errands, to pick Lily up from school. It was a reminder. A symbol that the most important things were not always the shiniest or the most expensive. They were the things that worked, the things that were cared for, the things that were built with skill and integrity. One evening, Elias and Lily stood by the gate, looking back at the workshop where the lights still glowed. The Ethelred was gone, delivered to Switzerland. In its place, a new project was already taking shape on the assembly stand. "Are you happy, Papa?" Lily asked, her small hand in his. Elias looked down at her, then at the workshop, his world, built on the foundations of what someone else had thrown away. He thought of Catherine Thorne, in her glass tower, surrounded by numbers on a screen. He thought of the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly balanced engine, of the camaraderie of his small team, of his daughter's future, secure and bright. "Yes," he said, and his voice was full of a quiet, unshakable certainty. He had not conquered the world. He had simply built his own, and found that it was more than enough.